The Journey to Mount Sinai is a film that I thought was going to be done like a long time ago. Like that was the first film I was making, and it is really the route from the sea to the mountain. And as we've done in other Patterns of Evidence films, I started out really focused on Jebel al Lawz as my target, because that was the one that was most inspiring and seemed to have all the connections, like a lot of people have learned. And what we've done in our Patterns films is that we look at the scriptures and we say, well, what are the patterns that you would look for Mount Sinai, and what is the pattern that you look for its for its journey, and what other things you need to find, like Midian. Where is the land of Midian? If Moses fled to the land of Midian, was he in the land of Midian, which is in north west Saudi Arabia, up in that corner there, and Jethro and all those different elements that you'd be looking for. And so we then, being challenged by actually Egyptologist David Roll, he said, well, you're just biased. You haven't really given it a fair chance. So what we do is we look at actually 5 mountains, and then we have a surprise mountain that we introduce, so it goes up to 6. But we look at so technically 6 mountains we're going to investigate, and we're going to investigate it against what we find in Scripture. And there's about 5 different steps that we're going to look at, and that is what this next 2 films are about. And once again, I thought it was going to be 1 film, but like Red Sea Miracle 1 and 2, we had to there's just too much to talk about, too much to investigate to be fair to all the different ideas. And these films are really timeless, because we'll have, documentation from probably the last 30 years, 30 or 40 years of people who've gone out there, and then we'll look back at the history of everything. So the very first film is focused on what are the things we're supposed to look at for, and then we're going to look a lot in the Sinai Peninsula. And we're going to be focusing on also inscriptions similar to the Moses controversy, these proto-Sinaitic inscriptions, because people are suggesting that those inscriptions are connected to the Exodus.
Okay, well, let's take a look. Here's a trailer, brand new. Here it is for Journey to Mount Sinai.
For the last 50 years, Exodus explorers have been searching for the true location of Mount Sinai. The Bible tells us that Moses and the Israelites were led there by a pillar of fire and cloud. I'm Tim Mahoney, an investigative filmmaker, and I'm looking for a pattern of evidence matching one of the most important events recorded in the Bible. The mountainous location where God came down to meet Moses and the Israelites. Exodus explorers are now claiming they found physical evidence for this biblical event. But there is a controversy, because this evidence is not where tradition places the mountain. How will we know which is the true location? It was recorded that after the Israelites crossed the sea, they camped numerous times on their way to Mount Sinai. Now, for the first time, Patterns of Evidence will investigate the journey of Moses and the Israelites. What route did they take, and what evidence still remains today? Join me on this amazing and inspiring investigation, Patterns of Evidence, Journey to Mount Sinai.
Okay, so there we go. So you caught me off guard there a little bit before we saw this trailer. We're not talking about the traditional Mount Sinai, what we think it is. There's 5 mountains involved here. I mean, are they spread out throughout Saudi Arabia? Are they all in the same general area?
No, these mountains are spread from the traditional Mount Sinai. There's 2 in the Sinai Peninsula, and then we start moving up to into the Negev, and then we start looking in Saudi Arabia as well.
So the Sinai Peninsula. So this is where this is the Constantine's mother's, Helena's Mount Sinai down in Egypt.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, in that little finger there called the Sinai Peninsula. But yes, we're going to be looking in that area, and we're looking at everything from, well, how many people were there on the Exodus? As we know, the scriptures, point out to that there would be literally, if you've got as many men as we're talking about, then there probably would have been several million people. But other people saying, well, no, that's not true. That the terms that were used are not meaning that. It's more like groups. And so we're going to be looking at how many people could you fit around a particular mountain. So we basically we'll look at the geographical grid. They could fit around those mountains. We're going to look for water. We're going to look for artifacts. We're going to look for attributes. We're going to look for all those different things and compare each mountain with what the scriptures say, as well as the definitions of backside of the mountain, that Moses went to the backside. Does that mean that he went to the west? Does it mean he went to the east? What does it mean when Moses went to the backside of the mountain with the sheep? And we're going to have, Egyptologist David Roll, and we've got Dr. Glenn Fritz, who's written a lot on the geography of the Exodus. And we've got the Exodus explorers coming in. We got a lot of different Exodus explorers that are going to make debuts on this and tell their testimony. So it's a big project. And that's the reason why part 1 will be in October and part 2 will be coming up in February of 2023. And so I think it will be encouraging. And I think the spiritual lesson that we talked about a little bit earlier is, if you think about the Israelites, they spent their time, and if you've ever been to Egypt in the Nile area there, it's lush. It's like the breadbasket of the Middle East, because it has all these growing seasons. You've got all the water you need. You've got, I think you can grow like three times you can grow crops a year. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but you've got a lot of ways to produce food. You've got fish, and all of a sudden God is taking you out into the wilderness, and he's basically, these Israelites are taking their families and children out to a place where would be death for most people, because there's no water and there's no food. And he's saying, I want to meet you. He's calling them to the mountain to meet with him and to make a covenant with these people. And this is very, very foreign. And we're going to be looking at the idolatry of the golden calf in connections with that in these films. And I'm also going to be looking at my own life and asking this question as well, am I any different complaining after God has done great things? I've seen great miracles. Because I've been kind of disappointed by the Israelites, because they're like, hey, didn't you see the parting of the sea? I mean, this is a big deal, and the water coming from different, water, but they were constantly complaining. And then I think it's, why should I care about this right now is that history repeats itself. And we can be just like those complaining Israelites if we're not careful. So I think there's some spiritual lessons to learn from these films that we need to know now, that, we need to trust this God and that he's going to be taking us to the promised land. And, the sad part was that generation at the end of this whole thing, they didn't get to go in the promised land because of their attitude. They didn't believe. And I think this is a question for all of us today. Do we believe that God is a God who will provide manna in a very dangerous situation?
I think go ahead, sorry.
Well, I think, we're living in at times for many people that they're living and we don't know what the future holds. We're going to have to really learn to trust God, and people are going to be watching us, right?
So I was going to ask that too. It seems like these films are very, you couldn't have timed this better, where it seems like the whole world, as far as from our perspective in America, is going to the bad place in a handbasket. And maybe we need to be brought to that wilderness to realize what we had was provided by God, but he can also provide in the dark times. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why these two films are, at this moment, as a filmmaker, as I look at it, is that we all go through dark times, and who do we turn to? Do we turn to alcohol? Do we turn, or what do we turn to? I should say, alcohol or drugs or other types of things to medicate. And what the Lord is saying is that you need to turn to me. I will be your shepherd and provision. And there are times when it gets hard. And I'm just speaking practically here. Is that when I saw the legacy of faith that we're seeing that was passed down, because Joshua, what did he say? As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And what I'm learning is that Joshua and Caleb, we're not to this part in the film yet. That's coming. But Joshua and Caleb, I'm sure that during the time that they were in this wilderness time, they were faithful to God, but they had to suffer along with the rest of them in the wilderness. They were ready to go in the promised land. So my point is that we might be going through hard times in the future here, and we need to know what our foundation is. And that's why I think these films are important, and why they're important to encourage you that there are patterns of evidence of God working in history from the past and from the present, and he will be there in the future.
Now, you mentioned there's a lot of footage from even up to 30 years ago. So are we talking Leonard Moeller's and maybe in some of these things? And
yes, Leonard Moeller, the Caldwells. We've got actually Joel Richardson will be in this film, Bob Cornuke, Ron Wyatt and others. What I'm trying to do is make a film that's not about one particular person, but about the entire sort of investigation. But when you make a film, we've got hundreds of hours of material, and we can only make a film that's like 2 hours long. So we've got to we're trying to spotlight what happened, and tell some of this story and weave it. And you could make it many different ways. But this next film, Patterns of Evidence, Journey to Mount Sinai, coming out in October, will be the beginning of that. And then once again in February, we'll be having the next film that will come out, which will be the part 2 of the Journey to Mount Sinai.
So in addition to the folks like Bob Cornuke and Ron Wyatt and legends like this in this space, you also spoke of some new folks. So tell us, who are these new folks and what are they finding?
Well, I can't give you the whole film away, and I might miss somebody. But we've got. Well, that's a good question. The new folks, we got Deb Hearn. I don't know if you know who Deb Hearn is, but Deb is really looking at Har Karkoum, and she's finding things at Har Karkoum that to her are very, very connected to the Bible. And she's going to build a case that the wildernesses that she's found, the wildernesses and how they were defined. And so we're going to hear her story. Bryant Wood, archaeologist Bryant Wood, is going to tell us why he has found the mountain and where he places it. And it has to do with roads, the roads that he has identified. And Sir Colin Humphreys from Cambridge, who we had on one of our films recently in the, I think, Red Sea Miracle series. He's going to be talking about his volcano in Saudi Arabia. And so those are some of the other people who are going to be promoting their mountains. And then we've got Peter van der Veen and Rabbi Mikkel. They're going to be talking about their surprise mountain as well.
Interesting. Okay. Now I know with your films, and I love the way you do this, you present all the evidence and you line it out for people and lead them through it. Is this film very much like that, where if someone is new to this whole concept of Mount Sinai and they just want to be led through it from a beginner's perspective, would they get it by watching your film?
Yeah, it's really important that you don't, I call it inside baseball, make a film where you're talking all this inside baseball stuff so people can't come along. So you have to define it, you have to make it so that it's entertaining, but that it's also defining so that people can come along. So if you know nothing about this, we'll explain it, but we'll try to do it in a very informative, creative, cinematic way that you can go on this journey with us and understand what's happening.
Okay, now, I guess the most important question is, your films also challenge people to come up with their own conclusion. You're not necessarily going to tell them what the answer is. Is this along that same line?
Yes, once again, I think that style is good. I think that the style of raising questions is better than telling someone, because then it's just, oh, that's your opinion. But if in the Bible, Jesus used questions and a lot, and questions are a Jewish technique, which I think help you lift the answer into your life. And if you don't work for it, and you're just told something, it's kind of like seed just falling on any kind of ground, and it doesn't always germinate. So I think that keeping people involved by allowing them to make that decision and hearing the pros and cons of it. So we're going to hear you're going to hear debate. You're going to hear the Exodus explorers saying why that doesn't work over there at traditional Mount Sinai, and the other people are going to say why this doesn't work over at Jebel al Lawz. And you're going to have to decide, okay, who makes the best case here?
All right. So the first movie now, again, is next week. People can go to patternsofevidence.com, get their tickets there. And Tim, if folks want to get involved in this next one, how do they go about doing that?
If they go to Patterns of Evidence and sign up for Thinker updates and just keep watching, and then hopefully we'll be connecting again so that we can keep you informed with what's happening with the release. But if they go there and sign up for a Thinker update, we'll be sending announcements. So it's patternsofevidence.com, patternsofevidence.com. And once again, we'll be sign up for a Thinker update, and we'll give you updates as to when the films are releasing and how to get tickets.
All right, excellent. Tim Mahoney, thank you very much for joining us. We wish you the best of success with these next two movies.